we're talking about a lot of disruption in terms of the environment that we've got. We've talked there a little bit about the need to create sustainable business, but also thinking about that cost base that we've got. Talking there about access to skills being one of those areas, big focus area that we're looking at new skills for people. And all of that actually plays into this topic of Northshoring. And the background to this topic and why it came up was I was actually talking to some of my colleagues in BDO, and I said I'm slightly surprised that there aren't more professional service firms that aren't considering the topic of Northshoring. And that led to the conversation with Richard, which was, haven't actually heard this phrase before. What does that represent? And this is all about, it's the first and the main reason for doing this is actually thinking about we need to get our cost base to a point where we are sustainable, and particularly where we are incurring costs relating to things where we're not necessarily adding much value. We've also got all of our staff who, I don't know about other people's experiences, but I think they're working incredibly hard in this environment. But they're working busy, and we need to think about making sure that they're focusing on those topics where they are going to add the most value. And so this whole topic of Northshoring comes up because it kind of says, how can we actually change the way that we operate? How can we change the way that we work? And what are our options for doing this? So if you think about any professional practice, what we've got is there's a whole slug of work we do, which we actually don't know whether it's intrinsic to what we do. It certainly keeps our people very busy, and they are busy doing it. And it generates probably a very stable revenue base for us, but it's not necessarily the thing that's adding the most value, and it's certainly not the stuff where the client is saying, the reason I chose you as a firm is because of that stuff you do. The reality is they probably choose you as a professional practice because of your relationships, because of your insights, because of your unique skills, because of your understanding of their issues. Not because you are able to produce lots of tax returns, not because you are able to produce a set of accounts, and not because you are able to put together some standard legal documents. So if we take that slug of stuff that many practices have, and you can think about your own practices, what might represent there, that's kind of the backdrop to this, to say, is there a better way of doing that without it all just being stuff that keeps our resource really busy, when we can actually get them focused on where they can add the most value? The other reality is, if we don't take that stuff away from some of our people, they will keep themselves busy and they won't invest their time in developing the skills which we actually are going to need in this new world. The reality is we are in a much more digital environment. We need people to be focused on those things. We are much more focused on client relationships, people willing to pick up the phone and talk to their clients, and the actual process and churn isn't where the value is. So the start for this is about freeing up that resource and finding a better way of doing it. It's also about driving the cost to a more attractive location. So this concept of Northshoring comes up because we're all aware of the traditional outsourcing models where we can actually throw the work to some distant shore. But sometimes that either feels a little bit hard to manage because we don't actually have a footprint in that location, or it doesn't quite do what we want. We don't feel we quite control it. We get a standard service and standard service levels. We don't feel we actually own and control that process. Or the other challenges around the perception, because the reality is, do your clients value the work being done in those other locations, or would they like to feel it was still being done here in the UK? And there are actually other complications to throw into this, such as data and where data can be based. If you missed it, we left the EU. We're just in the process of working out what that means in terms of all the data and everything else. And therefore, we actually need to think about, do we actually have more of that located locally? And also, the other thing that's going to happen is there's going to be quite a scary thing where I think we're all going to come out of this COVID world at the same time. I suspect, because there are many brilliant practices out there, we're all going to be pushing at the same time, and we're probably going to drive up a lot of salary inflation in the market, and the ability to attract and get the right resource for our business is going to be hard, and that will lead to salary inflation. So again, we get to this world of how can I access other skills and other talent to deal with a lot of what I'm doing, and how can I actually create that sustainable business and get the right cost base? Okay, so that's the concept of why this is relevant. So Northshoring, well, Northshoring is literally moving elements of your work up north. Why would you do that? Well, on a cost basis, the actual space cost, we did this at BDO, the space cost was 1/19 of that in London. That's 1/19 of that in London. We also, in the north of England, have a plethora of outstanding, good quality schools and universities. But we don't have quite the same level of competitiveness in terms of jobs that might exist in, say, London. So actually, if you think about the whole range of top tier universities that are located across the north, when you think across the outstanding schools that are in the area, what we have is a large number of skilled people coming out of those schools and universities. We have low space cost, and we are, believe it or not, part of the UK. And therefore, things like data security and the ability to manage those people and the ability to set your firm's values on what they're doing is all absolutely in your remit. There's other benefits of this as well. So so in the case of BDO, we have our offices all over the UK. But what we did was we repurposed one office. We repurposed Liverpool and basically built out that as our centre to do a lot of these functions. And they weren't all back office functions. It was tax returns, it was accounts, it was those kind of items where it didn't need someone to be sat with a client in London. It could be done in a centralised location. And by moving all this work into one location, it actually also created the benefits of leveraging what we did. And also then it gave us a focused place where we could think about things like automation, robotics, simplification of processes, rationalization of processes, and all those kind of lean factors. So that drove efficiency, which was one of those big topics that came up in Richard's survey. It drove efficiency through how we operate, and there's still a lot more we can do. But it's not just process as well, it's also accessing other skills as well. So when we did this, we've now got 350 people based up in Liverpool. And we actually have people that speak 32 different languages fluently because they've come in from the universities and have those different backgrounds. That gives us access to skills that we didn't have before. The investment in focusing on digital tools means that our ability to apply robotics and AI is much quicker. And also those efficiencies helping to drive efficiency in the organization. But also, what do you do when you suddenly say, I've got a piece of work coming in, who are the people who can deliver that? Well, actually, we have the ability to access a much wider skill base because of all those schools and universities, and so we can flex our resource and enable us to take on work quicker in a cost-effective way.